Kamala Harris is quickly consolidating party support for the nomination. Let's take a look at the argument that we're likely to see her making against Donald Trump. This is an ad from when she ran for president. It's already making the rounds again.
Sick of this? Well, think about this. He's a world leader in temper tantrums. She never loses her cool. She prosecuted sex predators. He is one.
Grab him by the...
She shut down for-profit colleges that swindled Americans. He was a for-profit college.
At Trump University, we teach success.
Literally. He's owned by the big banks. She's the attorney general who beat the biggest banks in America and forced them to pay homeowners $18 billion. He's tearing us apart. She'll bring us together. This is Trump. And in every possible way, this is the anti-Trump. So if that's what you're looking for in your next president, there's really only one, Kamala.
Kamala Harris for the people. Krystal, what do you think? Is that going to resonate?
To be honest with you, I do think there's something to, they're already saying they're going to frame this as like the prosecutor versus the felon. And I do think from just like a, normie perspective, it's a good contrast. And I think that's a good ad. I mean, this is back from when she ran in 2020, but setting up that dichotomy between herself and Trump, I think it works pretty well.
And one after another, her potential opponents, basically the set of governors, are either endorsing her or announcing that they're not going to run. So some reporting from Robert Costa here.
Sources close to several of the people who might be considered possible challengers to Vice President Harris for the nomination, people close to California Governor Gavin Newsom, people close to Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, all saying they're preparing to stand down. They do not believe that Democrats will challenge Vice President Kamala Harris at the convention in Chicago. Already in this immediate aftermath of President Biden's momentous decision, you see behind the scenes Democratic consolidation. The real race will be for vice presidential nomination on the Democratic side, but it is intriguing to me as a reporter. But there's no one at this moment preparing behind the scenes to challenge Vice President Harris.
That's right. Governor Gretchen Whitmer just saying with Biden out, my job in this election will remain the same, doing everything I can to help elect Democrats and stop Donald Trump. She wrote that on social media, so she will not get in the way of Kamala Harris seeking this Democratic Party nomination.
And the Congressional Black Caucus endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for the nomination. The chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, did as well. You can put up this tweet from Osita, who basically kind of puts a fine point on it. It says, CPC, New Dem, CBC, the matter is closed. It's not completely closed, but in order for it to be open, there has to be a candidate for people to rally behind.
Right.
And nobody seems to want to jump out and challenge her. All of these governors want to be president.
Right.
That is not in question.
Right.
So they are facing a possibility where if they beat Kamala Harris and Donald Trump over the course of the next 2 months, basically, they will become president of the United States, which is their abiding ambition, the thing that gets them out of bed in the morning. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are among the two most beatable major party candidates you could imagine.
Right.
So, yet they are all taking a pass. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think you've laid it out pretty clearly, which is, I mean, first of all, they worry not just about can they beat her, but they also worry about their future within the Democratic Party. They worry that if they go up against her and they lose, and then she loses, then they're blamed for it. They're worried, that also they're starting from behind. So even though Donald Trump is a weak candidate, even if by some miracle they were able to overcome the Kamala Harris train, which appears to have left the station, that they would be in a vulnerable position this time around. So they are hoping that she loses, so they think they have a better shot in 2028. Now, whether or not that's the case, who knows? But these are not really the most courageous of beings. So the fact that you had, the reason those groups, the CBC, the CPC, the New Dems, why it's important to put them together is because that's the entire breadth of the Democratic, ideological coalition in the House. So
and the squad.
The
all
squad,
except Rashida Tlaib.
All but except Rashida Tlaib, which is interesting because she's been the most outspoken, obviously, on Gaza. And Kamala Harris, it's been, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the Israel block too, but with regards to foreign policy, she's been a little more outspoken on the side of like humanitarianism towards Palestinians in Gaza during this? Does that amount to anything? We really have no idea, but it has been interesting watching all of the Israeli news outlets kind of freaking out and like trying to parse what she said and what it might mean for the future relationship with Israel and our policy vis-a-vis their atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank. So, you have all of those pieces, but ultimately, it really looks like it's going to be difficult to stop her unless you did have another Pelosi-Obama plot, not just to create the conditions of an open convention, because as you point out, that is happening. Even Kamala Harris says in her statement, like, I want to win the nomination through this process. There is going to be a process. It's just you have to not only have a process, you have to have a candidate who has some powerful support behind them. The other thing she has going for her is she's from California. It's the largest delegation, I believe. So you automatically have a lot of delegates who are likely to be in your corner. So far, I've seen Obama has left the door open to an open convention. Pelosi has left the door open to an open convention, but they're not putting their thumb on the scales for any particular candidate. And meanwhile, you've got Josh Shapiro, Roy Cooper, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, all backing Kamala Harris. And those are some of the, top names at the top of the list of who could potentially credibly challenge her in an open convention. But we should also be clear, with the group of delegates you're talking about, even if you had a Gretchen Whitmer, let's say, jump into the race against her, Kamala Harris comes in with a formidable advantage just from being the sitting vice president and having that sort of apparatus behind her. Yeah, absolutely. So they're thinking, well, I'll bide my time. I'll wait until next time. For most candidates, though, that clever thinking doesn't work. And the window closes on them. The political graveyards are filled with people who missed their moment. Christie. Exactly. And one of the people who knows that better than anybody else, say what you want about Barack Obama, he recognized he knew his moment.
Yep.
He went for it. We can put up this next element. So this was Obama's statement announcing like how much he loves Barack Obama. But the key there is that he trusts the party, he says, to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges, deciding not to put his support behind Kamala Harris. But with all the other point here is that all of these governors also want to be vice president, want to be on the ticket, and so they feel like even if they dither for a couple days and think about it,
right? They might be off that short list.
Oh, wait a minute, I haven't heard from JB yet. Where's JB? JB hasn't endorsed us.
Oh, they'll notice.
Then maybe you go to the bottom of that short list.
Yeah.
Or the calculations, like there isn't an alternative calculation that she's going to lose, and if I'm on that ticket. There's two ways of thinking about it. If I'm on that ticket, then am I toxic in 2028 for this implosion? Or is it not my fault because I was just thrown in at the very last minute and it was actually Kamala Harris that lost, and me being vice president means it's my turn then to run in 2028 as at the top of the ticket. But people don't actually know how this is going to unfold. And I think you should lose a lot of respect for people who have a shot at power, have wanted it their whole lives, and then don't take it.
Yeah, true. Who don't know to recognize or seize the moment. One thing you could say about Nancy Pelosi, she knows how to use power. She is one of the only Democrats that seems to still exist and Obama too, he chooses his spots, but when he intervenes, it has been quite powerful. I mean, here's the thing too about the rush of Democrats to endorse and line up behind Kamala Harris. This is a party that is terrified of any sort of even a glimpse of democratic choice. They just are. I mean, they were terrified of having a real competitive process this time around in 2024. And the argument that I hear, they can all read the polls, and some of them genuinely are committed to beating Donald Trump. They know that Kamala Harris is probably the second weakest candidate you could put up outside of Joe Biden. And yet they're resigned to falling in line behind her because they're so fearful of this quote unquote chaos at a convention where you really do have multiple candidates making the case and having to gather support and demonstrate some sort of strength and legitimacy to the American people. They're very fearful of a process that they don't have total like total tightly gripped control over. And so I think that animates some of the sentiment here as well, and the desire to just, all right, we're just going to coalesce behind Kamala. We're going to put this behind us. The Republicans were so unified. That's, the Democrats' greatest dream. That's like their greatest accolade, is when they can say that they were unified about something, even if that thing that they're unified behind totally sucks.
Yes, and it's based on a lot of public statements from people that were endorsing Kamala Harris, and I also talked to a couple members of Congress who went out early and made these endorsements, asked why. And we can actually put this element up while we talk about this. Harris performs like just 1 point better than Biden so far. And I think Biden generally in this New York Times analysis of all these polls was trailing by 3. Harris kind of basically trailing by 2. But like you said, it's impossible to really know because people are not good at predicting, how they're going to feel about something until it happens. Enormous numbers of Republicans said they would never vote for a convicted felon.
Right.
And then he was convicted, and they're like, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll vote for a convicted felon.
I'll vote for this convicted felon.
But yes, what people were telling me is that the question of unity was central. They hate the cable news Democrats in disarray type of narrative that's out there. So they want to squash that. They want to be unified.
Yeah. Whereas people like you and me, we would like the Democrats to be in more disarray more often.
Freedom's untidy, as Donald Rumsfeld said. And so one of them said that union leaders had been speaking positively of Kamala Harris, saying that their swing state members they felt could actually get behind Kamala Harris. So Kamala has been tight with organized labor, so that seems to have come to her rescue at this critical moment. And there's 5 weeks to the convention, and so there's just this feeling that it's both too short and too long. Like it's too long to be undecided about who your nominee is, and it's too short to kind of run a full campaign. So screw it, just do Kamala and get on with it and call it a day.
I feel like the lefties who have gotten behind her, who are, fully coconut pilled rather than just like maybe a little coconut curious.
Or ironic about it.
Or whatever. But I think the sense is basically like, listen, it's not like Gretchen Whitmer is going to be they're basically all the same, right? They're basically all just standard issue Democrats who are going to go along with whatever the current political winds are that make sense within the Democratic Party context. She has at least said some things that seem to be a little bit better on Gaza, so we're going to cross our fingers and hope she's a little bit better there, and just let this process play out and see who she picks for VP, and just it's almost like a resignation from the beginning that there wasn't going to be a real open process. So since it's going to be Kamala, let's just like buck up and get as excited about it as we possibly can. Is the sense I get from lefties who are truly coconut pilled.
Yeah, and you can put up D7 to pair with the last New York Times one. This is a CNN, their poll of polls. They average like 6 polls, and they find Harris behind just by 1 point. So basically statistically tied neck and neck with Trump. And so prosecutor going against a felon who's polling better than Biden, unity, like that's basically the argument for the Kamala Harris campaign. I
think it is my own vibe check for what it's worth. I think it is likely that she actually sees a bump in these polls because, for one thing, the narrative about her has been very negative, and in a lot of ways deservedly so, because when she has had these big moments on the national stage, she hasn't performed particularly well. However, Joe Biden has set the bar so low for a candidate, and Donald Trump has as well in his own way, that I think perhaps just having someone who is not Donald Trump or Joe Biden is going to be a relief for a significant number of Americans. Seeing someone who is going to be she is elected president, and this next term is not going to be 80 years old or well into her 80s by the time it's finished. I think that also
and she makes Trump look old.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. And I saw lots of Democrats immediately jumping on that. Can he serve out the next term? He's going to be the oldest in history, et cetera, et cetera. And, I actually think that there is something to that, because when we did the word clouds with Trump, it's not like his word cloud associations were great. Criminal was the number one. I believe old was in there for him too. Like there are concerns about him and his advanced age as well. So, you get this rollout for her, you get media excitement around her. She feels like even though she's been in politics and she's been the VP, they kind of kept her buried for a long time, so she feels like a fresh face. Also, the fact that she was completely disconnected from any of the power centers in the Biden administration now begins to look like an asset for her because she has a little bit of seeming distance from any of the negative decisions that were made there. So I suspect she's probably going to pick up in the polls a little bit, at least in the short term, and then we'll see if she's able to carry that on her own. But certainly going into the DNC, there's going to be so much of a better feeling about it. There are still, as Weigel was saying earlier on, still plans for protests against the Biden-Harris policy in the Gaza genocide. So you'll still have some discontent. But I think the young voters who were not going to vote for Biden, were disgusted with him over his policy, will be more open to the possibility of getting on board with a Kamala Harris.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.